Welcome to the Data Loss Prevention Landscape module of the Symantec Data Loss Prevention 15.5 Administration course. Data loss prevention, or DLP, is quickly moving from being just a security concern to becoming a critical business mandate. Several factors are driving this shift, including increasing use of the cloud and the advent of BYOD, bring your own device, into organizations, as well as data proliferation and privacy regulations. According to Gartner in 2016, data loss prevention and the enterprise DLP market are currently experiencing a renaissance through a second wave of adoption. The biggest driver is the breach activity that has engulfed organizations in nearly every sector of the global economy. This module will explore the business impacts, motivations, risk factors, regulations, and frameworks that shape the current data loss prevention landscape. DLP addresses risks that have long been known to information security professionals. These risks are focused on handling certain types of sensitive data, such as personally identifiable information, or PII, credit card holder data, financial and legal information, as well as companies' intellectual property, or IP. This module will cover Symantec's approach to managing that risk based on the maturity and best practices of hundreds of customers globally. In addition, this module will also present real-world customer anecdotes and experiences with DLP. This module will be covering the following topics: data loss prevention landscape, data loss risk management, and data loss prevention real-world use cases. The data loss prevention landscape. In recent years, news headlines have more and more frequently been announcing some new massive data breach. Organizations across the board have been affected, including government agencies, healthcare companies, retailers, and many other service providers, as well as millions of individuals. According to Verizon's 2018 Data Breach Investigation Report, there were over 2,200 confirmed data breaches in 2017, up from 1,200 breaches in 2016. The type of data that is exposed in such breaches ranges from personally identifiable information, or PII, to credit card holder data, financial and legal information, and company intellectual property. This topic describes the factors that shape the current DLP landscape, focusing on the business impact, types of data affected, and common sources of DLP threats. The unauthorized exposure of data represents a critical risk to organizations. There are immediate impacts, for example fees stipulated by laws, as well as long-term consequences, such as brand reputation that can carry irreversible damage. The Ponemon Institute, a private research center dedicated to privacy and data protection, has published yearly reports about the cost of data breaches. According to the latest study in 2018, the average cost for each lost or stolen record with sensitive and confidential information is $148, up from $141 the previous year. In general, this type of research focuses on PII, given that a cost model can be derived from the number of individuals whose information is exposed. Quantifying other types of information, such as intellectual property, is substantially more challenging. The financial impact is often the immediate and ultimate consequence of a data breach. There are several sources of financial impact, such as fines, credit monitoring and repairing, audits, litigation costs, settlements, and infrastructure, to name a few. The impact on productivity is also notable. It is not uncommon that organizations will need to implement emergency measures to control damage after a data breach, and these measures can affect current legitimate business processes, leading to productivity issues while the triage controls are in place. In addition, organizations dedicate important resources to developing their IP, through which they can offer innovative products and services to help them achieve their goals. An IP data breach, especially when the culprit is a competitor or a foreign state, can translate into a dramatically decreased competitive advantage. Additionally, more than ever, customers have serious expectations of privacy and data protection while they are shopping, receiving services, or attending to healthcare needs. Several companies have experienced customer attrition due to loss of trust after a data breach. Lastly, although it is not considered a typical business impact, data breaches that affect critical infrastructure systems and facilities can potentially have serious consequences for a nation and its citizens. While each organization has its own priorities for handling data, the data types identified as at-risk and protected by regulations fall into several categories. It is possible and accepted that the same information may fall into several categories according to the context in which it is used. The more common types of data at risk are personally identifiable information, PII, intellectual property, IP, financial information, healthcare information, and a variety of other forms of confidential information. First, personally identifiable information. There are several definitions of PII, but in general this term refers to any piece of data that can potentially identify a specific person directly or indirectly. Examples of PII commonly referenced in public and private regulations are full name, date of birth, national ID numbers, gender, religion, and even political affiliation. Almost every organization has to manage PII for employees, partners, customers, and other stakeholders. These entities are called data subjects in European Union (EU) legislation, and PII principals in North America and other regions. PII is a legal entity more than a technical one. Organizations should always ensure that they apply the proper due diligence and care when dealing with PII. Intellectual property, IP, refers to assets or works derived from human creativity and intellect. Examples can be source code, trade secrets, product designs, unique processes, drawings, manufacturing plans, price lists, rates, and tables. As is the case with PII, IP is generally protected by law. Organizations also need to protect strategic financial information, such as financial statements and scorecards that contain information vital for financial planning and forecasting decisions. Other tactical or operational information, such as account and routing numbers, loan contracts, employee payroll documents, and insurance details, also need to be protected. The healthcare sector is one of the most interesting fields in relation to data privacy and protection because it encompasses the integration of highly regulated industries. Healthcare organizations need to protect PII, IP, and financial information while conforming to several regulations and mandates. Finally, there is also information that does not necessarily belong to a formal classification, such as confidential memos and documents, merger and acquisition documents, marketing plans, and organizational charts, all of which may need to be protected. The most common threat sources for data loss are well-meaning insiders, malicious insiders, and malicious outsiders. It is important to identify different challenges that each threat poses to organizations. In general, loyal employees leverage the information and resources they need to legitimately perform their jobs. A combination of broken business processes, lack of training and awareness, or an absence of proper risk control procedures can be the source of serious data leakages. It is not uncommon for a well-meaning insider to cut corners, to make things more efficient, or to do something careless, putting sensitive data at risk in the process. In a study conducted by the Wall Street Journal Custom Studios in 2015, corporate executives who were surveyed admitted to intentionally or unintentionally engaging in behaviors that placed corporate data at significant risk of security breach. Those behaviors included the following activities. 53% uploaded and stored company documents on a personal USB stick. 51% emailed company documents from a personal email address. 44% uploaded company documents to file sharing sites so they could work from other devices or share with others. 38% shared company information and documents via social networking sites. 24% installed unauthorized software or accessed unauthorized cloud services on a corporate desktop or laptop. And 22% installed unauthorized software on corporate devices. A successful data loss prevention program must include an education and awareness component that trains users how to handle confidential data securely. Although well-meaning insiders represent the majority of data loss risk, there are unfortunately employees who are motivated by the desire for personal gain or who bear a grudge and are willing to take advantage of their trusted position within their organization. McKinsey & Company made a study of the Veris Community Database in 2018, which contains records about 7,800 publicly reported breaches from 2012 to 2017. Of the 7,000-plus records they examined, they found that 19% of the breaches were traceable to individuals within the organization who acted with malicious intent. In terms of driving factors, it was found that 15% of these breaches were motivated by financial stress, 13% by willful recklessness, 6% by nosiness or inquisitiveness, and 3% by attention-seeking. In Verizon's 2018 Data Breach Investigation Report, 73% of the 2,200 confirmed data breaches in 2017 had malicious outsiders as the main perpetrators, and in more than 60% of the breaches, they compromised organizations within minutes. Malicious outsiders, such as competitors, hackers, and criminals, are typically the masterminds behind the majority of the massive data breaches. These are the actors we frequently hear about in the news. People and organizations who are motivated to steal information for profit for their organization or for personal gain. They gain entry to an organization and look for easy targets, such as valuable information left in unprotected locations by well-meaning insiders. It is crucial to identify the local, regional, international, or industrial regulations that mandate the data protection practices for every organization. There are several countries that have mature data protection laws, but an unprecedented number of new regulations have been approved in the last decade worldwide. More importantly, these regulations are being enhanced with additional instrumentation where technology plays a definitive role for enforceability and compliance. DLA Piper LLP, a global law firm, created a very useful and interactive map of data protection laws, available at their website at www.dlapiperdataprotection.com. Additionally, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development has stated that as of early 2018, 58% of countries worldwide, or 107 countries of which 66 were developing or transition economies, have put in place legislation to secure the protection of data and privacy. The General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, in the European Union is designed to standardize data privacy legislation and provide a single common regulation across all EU member states, as well as Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, which together constitute the European Economic Area. Unlike the EU Data Protection Directive, under which each country defined its own national legislation, the GDPR must be adopted in its entirety across the EEA, although individual countries can make amendments. The regulation was formally approved on May 25, 2016, and became law across all EEA states on May 25, 2018. The GDPR applies to any organization collecting or processing personal data pertaining to residents of the EEA, whether or not that organization is based in the EEA. This concept, known as extraterritoriality, is an important feature of the GDPR and distinguishes it from the Data Protection Directive. The GDPR includes many security provisions, some of which do not relate to technology, but rather to an organization's policies and procedures. There are 4 areas of the regulation that can be applied to technology. 1. Know your personal data. Understand what personal data you collect, whether it can be linked to an individual, or whether it is sensitive, such as genetic or biometric data. Also, understand any retention rules that govern such data. Secondly, process data lawfully. Review the rules pertaining to the collection and processing of data and ensure that you adhere to such rules in a reliable and secure manner. Third, embed privacy. Make sure your processes embed privacy and that you take into account any ongoing technological developments that may jeopardize privacy protections. Consider not so much whether you can do something technically, but rather whether you should do it ethically, in the sense of analyzing whether it affects individual privacy. You can apply the creepiness test, as in, if what you are doing sounds creepy, you probably should not be doing it. Lastly, protect personal data. Implement full risk management of personal data, taking into account who has access to the data, where it is located, and how it is used. Protect personal data through strong information risk management and security. The GDPR imposes serious financial penalties for data breaches, up to 20 million euros or 4% of the global turnover, as in net global sales generated by a business, whichever total is greater. It also requires all businesses to report any data breaches, whether malicious or accidental, within 72 hours. Companies must inform both the central authorities and any individuals whose personal information may have been compromised. Citizens now have new legal rights to bring individual lawsuits and lodge compensation claims in the event of a data breach. It is important to note that if data was securely encrypted at the time of the breach, penalties and fines may be reduced. Fines apply when a company is deemed to have neglected putting the appropriate protections in place. If companies do not implement security, they are exposed to penalties for noncompliance. If companies suffer a breach in spite of their best efforts, report it promptly, and can demonstrate the best efforts they made, they will be less exposed to sanctions. If companies suffer a breach because of the lack of sufficient security, they may be sanctioned not only because of the breach itself, but also because of their failure to take adequate security measures. If companies suffer a breach and do not report it, they are exposed to higher sanctions because of the deliberate decision not to comply. The California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, which goes into effect on January 1, 2020, is very similar in spirit and intent to the GDPR. This table briefly summarizes the main points of this privacy legislation. The businesses that are affected by this law include any business, whether domestic or international, who collects, uses, discloses, or receives personal information of California residents, and to whom at least one of the following conditions apply: whether they have an annual adjusted gross revenue of over $25 million, if they buy, sell, receive, or share personal information of at least 50,000 consumers, households, or devices, or if they derive 50% or more of revenue from selling consumers' personal information. Under this law, California consumers will now have the right to 1. Request specific information about personal data that has been collected, 2. Access personal information in a portable format that can be easily transmitted to other entities, 3. Request deletion of personal information by businesses and associated third parties, 4. Opt out of the sale of personal information, and 5. Receive equal service and price even if privacy rights are exercised, with some exceptions. Penalties for non-compliance can include up to $2,500 per incident for unintentional violations and up to $7,500 per incident for willful violations. Consumers who are affected by data breaches can receive the greater total between actual damages or statutory damages, which can range from $100 to $750 per consumer per incident. To address the complexity of information protection, a number of best practices compilations and standards have been published. The Information Systems Audit and Control Association, or ISACA, in 2015 has presented an excellent compilation of frameworks that executives are using to manage their data privacy and information protection challenges. This compilation includes the ISO/IEC Information Technology Security Techniques Code of Practice for Information Security Controls, American Institute of CPAs and Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants Generally Accepted Privacy Principles, or GAPP, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, Special Publication 853, Security and Privacy Controls for Federal Information Systems and Organizations, the ISO/IEC Information Technology Security Techniques Privacy Framework, the ISO/IEC Financial Services Privacy Impact Assessment, and 2 additional NIST standards not mentioned in the study refer specifically to data privacy and are also good references for best practices. The SP 800-122 Guide to Protecting the Confidentiality of Personally Identifiable Information, and the SP 800-66 An Introductory Resource Guide for Implementing the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, security rule. In summary, this topic has covered the basics of the current data loss landscape. Data breaches affect organizations in many critical ways, including financial impact, diminished competitive advantage, and damage to brand reputation. PII, IP, and financial information are identified as the most common types of information at risk. Organizations can create and identify additional information assets that must be safeguarded from breaches. Well-meaning insiders are the most common threat to data loss, but malicious insiders are also a serious threat, given that they already have access to resources. Additionally, malicious outsiders are the masterminds behind the majority of massive data breaches. In the last decade or so, data protection laws have proliferated worldwide. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, for instance, helps standardize and strengthen data protection laws in the European Economic Area. Data loss risk management. Symantec has compiled best practices for more than 150 Symantec data loss prevention deployments across a variety of environments and industry verticals into a general risk reduction approach. These best practices will show how to create the right mix of people, processes, and technology, and apply that mix across 6 project phases to consistently achieve measurable risk reduction. The first step to long-term sustainable data protection is committing to an enterprise-wide DLP risk reduction program, which involves people, processes, and technology. When an organization decides to address this risk, they need a clearly defined plan for success, with specific steps, tasks, resources, and objectives to reach both their short-term and long-term goals. Cloud and mobile make businesses more agile. New functionality and processes can be deployed and activated quickly, and organizations can make adjustments on the fly if they need to. Cloud services and mobile devices make collaboration and sharing much easier. However, they also present difficult new challenges when it comes to securing devices and applications, particularly when more and more employees are using their own devices for work, many of which their employer does not monitor or manage. Privacy and security are the primary concerns that may cause an organization to hesitate about embracing the benefits of cloud, BYOD, and social network offerings. Data loss prevention is a business mandate, not a security initiative. The DLP risk reduction program needs to achieve the right balance between data loss prevention on one hand and business productivity and innovation on the other. To achieve greater risk reduction, faster, and with fewer resources, DLP risk reduction programs should include the following common attributes. First, executive-level involvement. Support for protecting data and changing business processes and employee behavior must come from the top. Second, a prioritized approach. Confidential data takes many forms and can be located anywhere in an organization. Targeting the most critical data first provides immediate value. Third, business owner involvement. The information needed to identify new threats, keep policies current, and fix broken business processes must come from those closest to the data. Fourth, a trained incident response team. Clearly defined roles, responsibilities, and procedures drive consistency and organizational buy-in. Lastly, employee education. Visibility into employee behavior enables focused training on primary risk areas, while real-time enforcement of company data protection policies promotes a culture of security. Symantec recommends a 6-step model to address data loss risk, composed of planning, deployment, baseline, remediation, notification, and prevention. The first phase of the model is the planning phase, and the objective is to establish the foundation for the long-term DLP program, including the following key tasks: assigning the right staff, targeting areas of highest risk, defining the incident response approach, establishing success metrics and milestones for the first 90 days, and developing employee outreach and communication plans. Customers who incorporate these key elements at the very beginning of their DLP initiatives develop a comprehensive organization-wide DLP program that can result in rapid achievement of their risk reduction goals. All of the requirements gathered in the planning phase are leveraged in the deployment phase. The deployment phase focuses on setting up the infrastructure, configuring the initial policies, reporting, and establishing an initial incident response workflow to allow for the project team's day-to-day system operations. Having a solid understanding of the business requirements and deciding which products will be deployed first will help you plan and execute effectively. The key tasks in the deployment phase include 1. Determining integration with existing business processes, 2. Confirming hardware sizing and deployment topology, 3. Validating integration with the current infrastructure, and 4. Deploying a solution and optimizing performance. The focus of the baseline phase is gathering data, understanding where the organization's risk is, and tuning policies and procedures in preparation for taking action in the remediation, notification, and prevention protection phases. Symantec recommends staying in the baseline phase for 2 to 4 weeks for each policy that is deployed. That length of time typically provides enough data for an organization to make sure policies are accurate, achieve a high-level understanding of where their risk is greatest, confirm that their approach to incident remediation will work, and to set some risk reduction goals. Some organizations stay in the baseline phase even longer, for up to 6 months. The benefit of staying in the baseline phase longer is that it is possible to detect processes that may occur only on a quarterly, semi-annually, or annual basis, but with the obvious downside that the risk levels will remain steady. The key baseline tasks will include establishing meeting schedules, tuning policies and procedures, organizing incidents to understand risk drivers, and beginning to track metrics. The focus of the remediation phase is changing the high-risk business processes identified in the baseline phase and further developing the remediation plan for all incidents. The involvement of business unit representatives is critical during this phase to identify and modify these business processes to make them more secure, but without negatively impacting normal business workflow. In addition, a fully functioning incident response team is essential to effectively moving through this phase. The work done in the baseline phase of tuning policies and procedures and understanding and organizing incidents should have helped solidify and focus the team's efforts. The response planning completed in this phase is the basis for the violation notifications key to the next phase, notification. The key steps in the remediation phase include 1. Working with business unit representatives to fix broken business processes, 2. Building an efficient incident response practice, and 3. Monitoring and communicating metrics. The focus of the notification phase is notifying employees of corporate policy violations to prompt behavioral change. This means, for instance, sending automated email notifications to give employees an immediate notice of policy violations, or automated pop-up messages notifying them of the violation and giving them the opportunity to justify their action. For organizations who have opted not to disclose their DLP initiative to employees, this means identifying the oversight areas and developing education and awareness programs targeted to the groups that pose the greatest risk. Symantec recommends that organizations be transparent and open with their employees about their DLP program initiative. This open communication involves employees in the program and encourages proactive risk reduction across the organization. The key steps in this phase include alerting employees, configuring, testing, and enabling notifications, and monitoring and communicating metrics. Customers will typically see a dramatic reduction in incidents after notifications are enabled. All of the work accomplished in the planning phase around employee communications helps make this the shortest of the phases as well. Preventing incidents, whether malicious or unintentional, is the end goal of any data loss prevention initiative, and the prevention phase culminates in auto-enforcement of security policies, including blocking network communications, file transfers and file copying, quarantining network communications and exposed files, encrypting email communications, and initiating forensic investigations. The key steps in this phase include configuring and testing prevention and protection, alerting employees, enabling prevention and protection, and monitoring and communicating metrics. Incident response, or IR, is one of the key success factors for any successful data loss risk management model. An organization's maturity level in its efforts to protect sensitive data is closely related to its IR effectiveness. Regardless of the type of data loss risk management model an organization uses, its incident response team should regularly evaluate their progress and determine the effectiveness of their processes, revising these processes as necessary. Workflow tuning, like policy tuning, is essential in responding to new risks and achieving successful risk reduction. In the centralized approach to incident response, also called fan-out response structure, a small group serves as first responders for all incidents and escalates critical incidents through defined channels to appropriate personnel or business units for further investigation or resolution. For instance, forensics, legal, compliance, or human resources. The first responder pool is small and focused, and the escalation responder pool is larger and more distributed. In contrast, the decentralized model, or fan-in response structure, consists of individual business units, for instance, finance, marketing, product development, etc., appointing select staff to serve as first responders for the incidents related to their business unit, and then escalate critical incidents to appropriate personnel for further investigation or resolution. Here, the first responder pool is large and distributed, whereas the escalation responder pool is smaller and more focused. This figure shows a practical example of an incident response workflow that an organization might use in its data loss risk management model. This workflow defines the paths that incidents take based on the policy violated and the incident severity. The example shows how incidents are managed through the various stages of remediation: automated response, first responder actions, escalated responder actions, remediation actions, and resolution. You can see here that a high-severity incident that violates the IP policy is automatically blocked, and the sender or user is notified, after which a first responder reviews the incident and, if necessary, changes the incident status to escalated. This places the incident in the escalated responder's work queue, where the responder might investigate the incident further and consult with the legal and HR departments before enrolling the employee in a short online data security course and informing the manager. In the end, such an incident might have its status changed to resolved training and then be closed. The diagram shows potential paths for other types of incidents as they go through the incident remediation workflow. We will cover incident remediation in more detail in a later module of this course. In summary, this topic has covered Symantec's approach to data loss risk management. Symantec's data loss risk reduction program proposes a comprehensive, business-oriented program to achieve greater risk reduction faster and with fewer resources. The proposed approach provides a solid foundation for DLP risk management. However, it is necessary to constantly reconfirm that the controls and procedures surrounding it remain valid and appropriate. Data loss prevention real-world use cases. In this topic, we'll discuss some of the real-world experiences of Symantec DLP customers. Becton Dickinson, or BD, is a U.S. Fortune 500 medical technology company with over 30,000 global employees. IP protection was their primary driver for DLP. BD was expanding its medical device development overseas and had growing suspicions that critical IP was being leaked or stolen. BD observed competitors launch products that were similar to products they still had under development in the U.S. And not only that, they had discovered that a small group of senior R&D staff who had relocated were downloading terabytes of data, which was highly unusual. BD was able to see high volumes of data walking out the door, but did not have visibility into the content or context. As a result, there was a tremendous push from upper management to deploy DLP to prevent the leak of highly valuable IP. Within 10 days of deploying Symantec DLP, BD started reviewing incident files with their R&D business unit. The majority of incidents were caused by broken business processes. However, one case stood out to an R&D staff member. An engineer who had resigned was using email and removable storage to abscond with a massive number of confidential files containing trade secrets. BD immediately involved the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, who detained the engineer and seized all of his computers and devices. This high-profile case was covered by the Wall Street Journal. Barnabas Health is New Jersey's largest integrated healthcare delivery system and the second largest private employer in the state, providing services for more than 2 million patients each year. Barnabas Health's challenge was the need to secure and manage large amounts of mission-critical and highly sensitive electronic data. To remain compliant and avoid potential fines, Barnabas Health needed access controls and technical safeguards to protect restricted electronic content from unauthorized use and transmission. Barnabas Health added Symantec DLP in 2010 to enforce restrictions on the sharing and transmission of sensitive patient information among physicians and medical staff. Barnabas Health developed new information sharing policies and created warning messages for end users to raise awareness about and reinforce the hospital's regulatory compliance obligations. Barnabas Health is using Symantec DLP to detect sensitive data on hard drives and to then block emailing, printing, or copying of restricted patient information. Before the software was implemented in 2010, the Barnabas Health IT security team had identified an average of 15 instances per quarter of possible high-risk events, such as the transmission of a patient's personal medical file or social security number. It took an IT analyst 2 days to investigate, confirm, and correct every breach by cleaning the confidential data from the mail server, employee mailboxes, and backup tapes. Although Symantec DLP now generates breach alerts at about the same rate, the percentage of events that are now considered major dropped from 100% to 25%. Moreover, technicians' research and remediation time has been cut in half to just 1 day. The remaining 75% of alerts were judged to be minor and are repaired within 2 hours. In summary, these real-world use cases provide examples and demonstrate how the recommended characteristics of a data loss risk reduction program, such as executive-level involvement, a prioritized approach, business owner involvement, a well-trained incident response team, and employee education, have helped organizations with complex challenges drive down risk in a sustainable fashion. In review, this module has presented an overview of the data loss prevention landscape. In the first topic, we explained how several factors, such as cloud, BYOD, data proliferation, and global privacy regulations, have transformed DLP into an important business mandate. This shift is driven in part by the notoriety that data loss breaches bring to organizations in several critical ways: financial, decreased productivity and competitive advantages, and damage to brand reputation, and even to national security. The second topic covered data loss risk management, explaining how DLP addresses risks that have long been known to information security professionals. These risks are focused on handling certain types of sensitive data, such as PII, IP, financial, and healthcare information. Risk is driven mainly by three common threats: well-meaning insiders, malicious insiders, and malicious outsiders. Symantec's suggested approach to managing data loss risk is to embrace a DLP risk reduction program based on 5 underpinning attributes: executive-level involvement, a prioritized approach, business owner involvement, a trained incident response team, and employee education. Such a program is best implemented through a 6-step process: planning, deployment, baseline, remediation, notification, and prevention. And lastly, the module has covered real-world customer anecdotes and experiences with Symantec DLP. More information about the studies and research mentioned in this module can be found at these reference links. Thank you for joining us. This concludes the Data Loss Prevention Landscape module of the Symantec Data Loss Prevention 15.5 Administration course.